mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child that she's born, though she may forget, I will not forget you. See, I have engraved you on the palm of my hands. Wow, the majesty of God is overwhelming. The victory found in our journey with God is well worth the process, isn't it? We've made it to the top. I promised you at the beginning of this journey that we would get here and that you would be a different woman. Was I right? My guess is that God's done the most amazing thing in your life over these past several weeks. That's not to say that all the work that God's doing in your life is done. Oh no, God's work is a process. This has just been one little journey. In fact, many women who work through Surrendering the Secret go through a second time as a participant. There's a lot of work to do in this study, and sometimes it takes more than one time through to complete certain stages of healing. Even by going through a group as a co-leader, God will continue to heal your heart and show you more that He has for you. For the first 4 or 5 years that I led healing groups, God continued to work out many things in my life. Issues and attitudes that led to my abortion, as well as the things that followed. Bad decisions and choices. Each woman who shared her story with me brought out new things that were hidden in my heart that I'd shoved aside or refused to admit. Regardless of the timing or the individual process that God uses, I've never taken a group on this journey in over 20 years that I've not watched God change their lives before my very eyes. It's been the most amazing privilege, one that I'll be spurring you on towards next session, but we'll talk more about that later. For now, even though I can't see you, I'm certain that your face is different than it was when you first stepped onto this dreaded mountain climb. You've accomplished so much. Do you remember the story of Esther in the Bible? I love that story. In fact, I've loved it so much over the years that I've transferred that love to my own daughter, who now claims it as her favorite as well. The thing that I love most about Esther is her courage. She never signed up for her assignment. Putting her pretty little neck on the line was not her idea of a good time. But God had a plan, and she, in her obedience and love for God, followed His plan to the salvation of a nation. God also has a plan for you. He chose you for this journey. He wants you healed and whole and ready to be given an assignment that'll change the world just like He did for Esther. But first, we have to end at the beginning. Remember how at the start of our journey we had to understand how going back is sometimes required for moving forward. We're kind of at that place again. Last session, you ended with a bittersweet assignment. You were asked to write a letter, a poem, or a song to your unborn child or children, and to bring it with you to this meeting. I know that your mother's heart is full of loss and sorrow over the child of your heart who's missing from your life. I know. I have a daughter who's standing with yours. God, in His tender mercy, allowed me to see her in that special way that we see things from God. She was whole and joyful and full of grace and mercy for me. I actually saw her reach out and comfort me. Imagine that. I believe you probably can. She assured me of her place with the Lord and her anticipation that one day we'd be together in heaven, the day that she would meet her brothers and her own precious sister. You must know that you'll never be completely able to walk away from the longing to embrace that lost child, but also know that God's love is sufficient for you. He'll give you an everlasting peace that when you think of that son or daughter, His peace is bigger than your grief or loss. In this session, we're going to do what we've never been allowed to do, what we never knew how to do, what we never thought we had a right to do. We're going to celebrate and release until that day in heaven the beloved child that we lost so long ago. We're going to stand together for one another. We're going to acknowledge their precious lives. You're surrounded by sisters who understand. We want to acknowledge the life of your child with you. Trust God in this process. Trust His timing. If you've come to this session and you've not accomplished what you think you should have or desire, trust God. I've seen Him do amazing things before, during, and after this time together. If you're in that place, keep doing what you've learned to do on this journey. Surrender. This is a time to celebrate, ladies. We've completed a journey. Our sisters have completed a journey. Our children have been seen and acknowledged, and we know that they're with God. He's exchanged our sin for His goodness, His mercy, His peace, and His promise. He has plans for our future. Rest and celebrate. Next session, we're going to talk about that future of yours. All right, ladies, we're finally here for our celebration moment. We've led our sisters through the Great Exchange, and that was so fun to watch all of you share what God's done with you through this journey, and hearing your stories all again. So I know that the ladies that have been with us have loved that. So this time we're here to do what our mothers' hearts have longed to do forever and ever. And so let's start talking about that, can we? How about you, Christy?
Well, this was the biggest part to me in the whole journey. It was one of the hardest places for me, though, because the homework was that we had to go home and write a letter to our child and pray and ask the Lord to reveal to us what the sex of the child was and a name for the child, and or write a poem or something. And I did not want to do that. And I did it. I went and sat out by the water, and the Lord wrote a poem through me, which is miraculous since I've never done that before, and a letter. And He showed me, I really prayed that He would show me a picture of this child. And He showed me that she was a girl, and she was 20 years old, not a baby, but 20 years old. And she had long brown hair, and He told me that her name was Aaliyah. And I knew that it was Him and not me, because I didn't have any of these images in my mind or a name in my mind or anything. And so we went to the group, and Sue Ann was the facilitator, and we started off where she handed me a baby doll. That was the very first part of it. And I didn't want to hold the baby. I said, "Do I have to hold the baby?" And she said, "Well, yeah, I think this is part of it." So I held the baby, and I was the first one to go, and I was feeling a little bit apprehensive because it was another vulnerable place. Because here I'm pretending now, okay? This is the baby, and I've had other children since then, but this hit something in me. And so I held the baby, and I read my letter, and that was very hard. And I started to break down, and we just closed our eyes during this part of the process and prayed. And I remember, so she asked me, "What had the Lord revealed to you at home?" And so I said, well, that she was a girl and her name, and that she was 20 years old. And Sue Ann said, "Well, what else?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean, what else?" And she said, "Well, let's just take some time right now and let's just pray. Will the Lord reveal anything more about this child?" And I said, "Okay." And so everybody was in prayer. It was a very intimate, beautiful time, and it was very powerful. And so I closed my eyes, and I saw a vision of her. God blessed me and showed me a vision. And she was in a white dress, and she had a globe in her hand. And I knew that she had a mission. She was not just sitting in heaven. She was on mission for the Lord to hasten His return. And the Lord spoke to me so clearly, and He continued to show me this after I left the group, that where the enemy thought that he had won by the destroying of all these lives, that God had such a greater plan, that these lives, even though we can't understand it in the natural, and our mind, we can't get our minds around it, these children are being used in an even more powerful way for His kingdom in the spiritual realm and bringing the day of the Lord. And when I was overwhelmed by that. And not only was that so beautiful and powerful, something I had never ever thought of that the Lord revealed to me, but I had a relationship with my daughter. I had gone from all I ever thought about was a baby that was murdered and just a big blob of blood and tissue and pain, to now all of a sudden I have a daughter. that I really have a relationship with. God did that. God did it. And it was so miraculous, and it was so beautiful. And only He could do something like that.
It's such a gift because it restores dignity to the child. That's what I remember feeling, that this child was not in vain. And perhaps she's not of this natural earth, but there's so much I learned from that child and from that experience, and that I continue to learn. I mean, I learned grace. I received my salvation. I am a part of this group. I mean, so many things came out of that experience that I look to her and almost, want to say, I'm sorry, but thank you. You changed my life. You made me a different person. Rather than imagining a little cherub sitting on the clouds, like you said, there's a relationship there in my mother's heart and what she did for me. And when I think about it now, I think about my life with more purpose for her, and that abortion was not in vain, and that I carry on for her and want to heal other women for her. And sometimes I think when I'm doing a group like I shared, I feel like saying, this one's for you. You're important to me. And the other part that I love about the session is you know her. I'm able to share her. She's real. You remember her name. It's not anything, woo, like that sort of thing. Just like I appreciate that my other friends know my living children. It gives me so much peace to share some of her attributes, and that it's received in such a beautiful way.
And just one other thing that I want to say about that is just, I know with everything that's in me that the Lord revealed this. And that all these children have a mission. They have, their destinies are living on. And so that is just such a beautiful way of what God does with our lives. And how, once again, what the enemy intended for harm, God intends for good, for the saving of many lives.
And I guess when it came to getting the gender of the baby and the name and everything, I struggled with that because I didn't get it right away. And it was hard for me because I felt like I can't come to group without that. I mean, that's just not fair. That's just not right, that they're getting these visions and seeing their children, and I wasn't. I thought, I better come up with something. I can't go back. That's just not, So I was trying to fumble around to come up with names, and I kind of started to get a little bit of a sense that it was a girl, but I never got a name until later. And it was awkward for me because when I finally got the name, it happened to be Pat's future daughter-in-law's name. And it was so weird to me because I was working there. But it was almost a sense of relief because I was trying to give her all these names, and I had lost a sister, so I thought, well, maybe that would be her name. And I labeled her with so many things, and nothing fit, and it kept getting spit back at me somehow. But not being really spiritually strong, I didn't know how to handle that. So I felt so lost for a long time until it finally came about, and it really came about when I wasn't really looking.
I felt the same way, and to be honest, I kind of, almost felt like a spiritual loser because it was so deep, and it was beautiful, and I sat there and I was at peace. It didn't feel weird, but I wasn't getting anything. And I did sense in my heart, and I do sense in my heart and know that she was a girl, but after meeting and getting to know Christy, I'm going to go home, and I now, even all these years later, if that's a gift that God has, I'm going to sit and wait for it, and I'm going to ask because I know I don't have a name.
Yes.
It was a little unusual for me, and I didn't. It just didn't come to me. So I think it's important that everybody know that everybody receives differently.
Right. I think that those are such good comments because, as you recall, Linda, when you first came to the group, there were certain things going on in your life, and there was a bit of grieving of Lauren involved in your abortion healing. And I think it's so true that each of us, like Christy, you were mentioning the things that you were going through in your life. I think that because of where we are in our lives, where we are in our walk with the Lord, a variety of things are involved in this entire process. And that's why we say it's often encouraged to go through a second time or become a co-leader and help lead a group, because God does this healing process in our own personal way. The Word says He knits us together in our mother's womb and that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. Each of us are different women, and different healing processes are needed for each of us. So, we want to just be at peace with how God chooses to work in our lives, and thankful. And we see the result.
Just on a nurse's note, that I know sometimes people have come to this group with a lot of trepidation, because it does feel strange to think about holding a baby doll and talking to it and asking questions. But I think what Linda will share, that is such the right thing to do. I know at the hospital, when a woman loses a child, the first thing we want to offer her is a chance to bond and share with that baby. We're all around her, where when we choose abortion, that's not permitted. It's immediately made into a secret, and nobody can ever know. No one can share our grief. We don't deserve anything that would make us feel better. Well, your experience,
you're not allowed to grieve,
right?
Because right away, like you said, it becomes a secret and hidden. And my husband and I, we lost our very first child. Was a daughter. Her name was Lauren, and we lost her childbirth. And when we knew that she was going to be stillborn, my first thought was, no, just take her away. I can't bear it. It's too painful. And the nurse said, okay. And so they took her away. And an hour later, I'm like hitting the nurse's button. Okay, could you bring her back? Bring her back. And the nurse knew and brought my daughter, wrapped in with a little pink hat, and my husband and I, we got to hold her, get to just touch her little face and kiss her cheeks and hold her. And the doctor, which I just believe an angel sent by God, that he spoke these words. He said, it's so important, Linda, that before you can mourn her death, you have to celebrate her life. So we got to sit there, my husband and I, and celebrate this life. And to know and validate that she was here with me, that she was a part of us, that she was us.
Right.
And then it was easier to let her go. And when you have an abortion, you don't get to do that. So what's so precious about, Pat coming up with this part of the celebration, and it may seem kind of weird, you may feel like you didn't want to hold the baby, and I didn't even want to hold my real the physical baby that I could hold, because it seems awkward. But it validates, and your mother's heart, you want to hold something. And then when you do, you can let go in peace. And then I remember when I went through this session, it didn't even occur to me really what I had lost until I remembered what I had so dear to me with Lauren, that she existed, so that I got to go back to that child and picture her, because in my heart I knew she was a girl also, and hold her in my heart. And last time we talked about our forgiveness for ourselves, but in this session you get to feel her forgiveness. And to be able to have that is, it's priceless. And I know afterwards, when we would get sympathy cards and people would say that we were so sorry to hear about Lauren, or we long to see Lauren someday in heaven. When they spoke her name, it made it real. And here we acknowledge your daughter, Aaliyah. We know her.
Right.
We acknowledge each other's, and the world doesn't let us do that. It's just, it's something very precious to go from that horrible, hurting feeling to the joy, in a weird way, that we could have joy in this. That's only God.
Christy, I remember you not wanting to let go of that baby doll.
I know.
At that point, it's like
you didn't. And then I didn't want to let go.
And for me, when I went through my group, all of it was a little. The best word really is weird for me, but I decided that I would do some of the homework kind of things, try to understand. I had never given it any thought at all to understand the gender and to talk to God about what the name was. And so I decided to just kind of have these conversations with God while I was running one day. And it was so amazing to me that He gave me, while I was running, that understanding that it was a boy, and he would have been about 20, 21. And He gave me the name right then and there. It was Carpenter. And I'm like, where, it's hard to, you just don't even know where these names come from. But then when I was in the group session and asking God to show me him, I saw a young man on his knees praying, and he was praying for me. And to understand that even, and that's all God gave me at that point, and that's all he has given me even today, but to understand that his purpose even then was a concern for his mother. And that to receive, to be able to talk to him and then to receive forgiveness and these words from him that I'll just never forget. You know, it's basically, he said, "You would have been a great mom." And that was just so beautiful.
The last vision that I remembered before this part was the vision of when I gave birth. And I knew it was a boy because of how far along I was. That was obvious. But then I asked the Lord to give me a name, and he gave me the name Daniel. And then I was to write this letter, and I was still very detached because I think of my age, and I was just starting to pick up on this mother part. And in this letter, this was the piece that spoke to me the most, because this is when I got to tell my child. I got to talk to him for the first time, and it was just so beautiful. I got to share everything with him and how I wish he had been here and how I knew he knew my other children and how proud they would be of who he was. And that name Daniel is a warrior's name. And at this time, I wanted to be open-minded in this group because I have never experienced the spiritual peace I was about to experience. And I trusted Jane and I trusted the rest of the group, so I was just going to be open to it because I knew I wanted it. I knew I wanted to reattach. I knew I wanted to feel everything God had me and wanting to feel. And so at that time when I closed my eyes and I was given the vision, I was given him the vision of who he was at that age that he was. And then I could understand why his name was the name that he had. And that's because behind him was like just millions of children. You know, it just was endless. That's all I could see was millions of children. And then there he even called me mom and asked me, and I consider it commissioned, not just me, but everyone that was there and every woman who hears this and every woman who goes through this, that these children, they're in victory, they're in heaven, they're with Jesus. They would not come back if we even asked them to. But where there would be tremendous loss and where there would be defeat and where the enemy preys is on the women who have terminated their pregnancies, the women who are here, if they didn't know the Lord, and that he was commissioning me and those that I knew, that it was our responsibility now to share that, to share the truth, to share our story, to give back that hope so that there could be a celebration in heaven again with every mother, with all of her children. And that is the greatest victory. And I could celebrate with that hope because we're here, and if we're here, then we can give that hope to all that we come in contact with. I don't care where, I don't care how. And that is why I celebrate, and that's why I feel there's true victory here for everyone who comes through this Bible study and gets the healing and then has the courage because of what they've come through to share that hope with others.
And I think it's interesting that you saw him as a warrior. Aaliyah is a warrior. She was on a white horse. This is what they are. They are commissioned. They have assignments in heaven.
Yes.
And it's beautiful to know that. We just know it and we receive it. And it's just such a blessing. So who would have thought we would have gone from such pain and despair to actually feeling blessed?
Yes.
Feeling blessed.
You know, though, if you hadn't surrendered yourself and opened yourself, like you said, to the experience of maybe something that might have been out of your comfort zone, to close your eyes and pray for a vision, then you would not have had that gift. And we have gone from the beginning of this to where we talked about it and my aborted child to, like somebody said before, the death, to now we're talking about our daughters, our sons, with names that are people, so that the child of our nightmare has now become this child of our dreams. So by opening up, and that's why encourage everybody that's doing this Bible study to really step out and just trust God with the next part, because that, like you said, Natalie, is the victory.
All along I knew I was forgiven, but I didn't have that closing piece of every time I think about it now, I can think about it with joy, with amazing joy that only God could have given me. I don't think about that past anymore. It was another person's story. It doesn't matter. That's not who he is. That's not what he's like. No. But I wouldn't have had that peace if I had not been obedient and faithful, and if I had not been led in a group with people I could trust and love that were sincere, that were there for us as the leaders, and the support from the rest of the group. Because I wouldn't have done it. And even on my own, why would I ever have done that on my own?
It's the first time that we really also acknowledged that we were mothers then. You know, now as counselors at the pregnancy center, when a young girl comes in and we find that she's pregnant, and she says, like, I don't want to be a mother. I'm like, you already are. Yes. That moment, your body's already started responding physically to be a mom, but your heart knows you're a mom. So we've always known we were a mom, but we didn't, that's a privilege. And we didn't deserve that privilege. And now we can know that we're moms, that we were moms.
And my children know that now too.
Right.
So that missing gap, that
There's
you
no
always know
loss
there's a
anymore.
gap, there's no more gap.
No loss.
There's no more gap.
And it's such closure to know that we've placed that baby in such a safe place. You know, it's such a, because as moms, we're always worrying, you know, where are they? Are they okay? And the peace that God gives you, that you know they're just where they need to be. What better place could they be? But he allows us to keep just a little bit of it in our mother's hearts, and that we carry on for them. And we're better people because of them. And I just love that the way
Well,
that...
also that the babies have purpose.
Right, and
that
we are
these
purposed
children have purpose
through
and
them.
we have purpose
That's
too.
right.
None of this process was in vain.
Right.
Not one bit of the course that we took, whether it was roses and sunshine or the pain that we went, that none of it was for vain.
I think we understand, we finally draw the line too, where I feel like in my life I have definitely seen the enemy face to face. And next time, if you know, I'm going to be so much more aware. And if I see him, you know, I just feel like I'm so much more equipped now at this point with Christ in me to handle that. And I don't want to be duped again. And my heart's desire is to help women who have been through that and miss it if they can, but if they don't, to know that there's healing through that, and there is.
I think it'd be really cool if you would share your poem with us, Christy, that you have written for your daughter, since you have it with you today.
It's called Aaliyah. Aaliyah riding on a white horse, a globe is in her hand. She leads others behind her as they go forth to accomplish the Master's plan. Her strength, her power given from above will descend upon this place by his great unfailing love. There is a purpose in her hand, written by the one seated on the throne. It is to bring forth salvation and bring many to his own. Her innocent blood was shed. By the enemy she was stolen away. Yet God has redeemed her life in an even more powerful way. She lives on, her destiny lived out by him who is yet to be, an anointing of the Lord that will bring forth victory. Aaliyah, my daughter, I will forever cheer you on, and praise my Father in heaven for your mission given by the Son. He opened up the heavens and gave me a glimpse of this incredible plan. This blazing fire he ignited in you, he will continually fan.